So Drought, we've been there before. Today, and I'll just give a general disclaimer because I have to do that these days. The following presentation is general in nature and should not be considered as advice. All right, and the presenter and Cybers take no responsibility, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to make changes, you know, talk to someone independently as well, all right? But hopefully, as always, when I present, I'm very open with what we talk about, and I hope you guys will be open with the discussion as well. And I just want to emphasise, this is a discussion, okay? And a lot of the slides I'm putting up, pretty simple slides, but they're a prompt to discuss things rather than, you know, a big chalk and talk. Everyone's views, opinions and experiences are welcome and respected, okay? And there is a diversity within the room which I think is really rich and rewarding. And again, I've been lucky enough for the last 25 years to run around farms, and most of the learning that I've done has been from the people I've been lucky enough to work with, okay? As well as a little bit of, you know, reading on the toilet when I get a bit of spare time in between. So every farm here is going to be impacted differently by the drought, and they've got different resources available, and they need to address their own situation with unique and appropriate solutions, okay? And again, you're all going to have different situations. We've got, how many of you guys are lease farmers here? 2 lease farmers. We've got owners, okay? Combination. Max is owning and leasing country. So, you know, already there's differences in owner structures and differences on financial need. You know, if you've got a lease sitting there every day that you've got to pay the lease. Okay, so that means your options to get rid of all the cows and do nothing, it's probably not the best option when you've still got to pay that lease. So we've got different things that we need to think about in that space. Really, really important. Okay, we're going to focus on influencing what can be influenced. I can't change the milk price, so I'm really sorry about that. I mean, interestingly, you know, we've had some farms that have been able to change their milk price by looking at other processes and other production modalities. We've worked with one farm to go through an A2 transition a few years ago. We did that in good times. It's really looked after them well in bad times. So, and again, quite often midstream's not the time to make a big change. You probably have to think about if you're going to change the fundamental way you do things, to do that when you're supported by better times. Okay. Hopefully different aspects of what we discussed that are variably useful to everyone. And again, a lot of this stuff is going to be pretty basic. And again, I think for the service providers here, who's, you know, more than half the group, and I think there's some common simple messages here that I think that can come back out to the farmers that you're working with, that just basics that some people just aren't doing. And a lot of people are making decisions on the run, which is understandable because it's an incredibly stressful environment, and people are grabbing opportunities just because they're there, okay, and taking options just because they're there, rather than actually going back and looking at things a bit more objectively at times and making the best decision. And a lot of time people, because they don't get out very often, you know, they're really relying on the service providers to come on the farm to let them know what other things may be out there with respect to doing things a little bit differently. Okay, so look, I think I'm a huge fan in going through the detailed data gathering process, and with the likes of being involved in things like Farm Monitor and taking stock, or whatever mode you do, be it even a good review of your own account of your financial situation. It really does give us a good picture of the business. I think you've got to be super careful as you know, I hope I wasn't too annoying here when I was just saying, you've just got to be really careful with comparing yourself against big data sets that aren't randomly collected. And again, I think, you know, Rod touched on it beautifully. You guys touched on it beautifully. Steve? Yep. When you said, look, this is good data, but we compare ourselves against ourselves. And that's the core of those data sets. So it's all well and good to say the top 25% are doing really, really well, okay? And this is why, but quite often it's not why. There's stuff going on in the background. It's a bit like saying, you know, so-and-so down the road, he uses, you know, Concord 2 ryegrass and he's making millions of dollars, okay? It's not that he's using Concord 2 ryegrass, it's that he gets it in on the right date, he sows it with the right fertiliser, his grazing management is excellent, yada, 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 yada. It's a complex pie that goes into making that equation.
So look at your bank balance now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the best indication, Scott. And, you know, we can look at EBITs and all those sorts of things. At the end of the day, cash in the bank's the most important thing. And I guess this is why I think it's really good to have those sort of big picture annual or 6 monthly snapshot type reviews, But from day to day, there's some certain things that I think we really should be looking at, okay? Not necessarily daily, but maybe weekly or monthly, just to understand how you're travelling. Because it's pretty simple what drives your business. It's how much money you make out of milk, okay? But okay, everyone put your hand up right now if you can tell me what your cow per day in milk income is. Right now. No, in dollars. What's your cow making per day? Boom, okay? And that's okay, that's a completely normal response, okay? But at the end of the day, well, how can you make informed decisions if you don't know if your cow's making $5, $10, $20 or $30?
Well, I'll look at how many litres she's giving, and I multiply it out, and I say,
beautiful.
6 kilos of feed is costing me 50 cents a kilo.
Perfect.
It's $3, we're still making a few dollars.
And this is exactly where I'm heading to, Rod. You know,
but Stephen, well, we're going to spend some more money.
We're going to spend some more money. And we'll bury it all as imputed labour so we don't look like we're making anything.
I just need another 10 tonne of fertiliser.
But at the end of the day, I think, you know, just that one simple calculation says, okay, well, I've got $12 a cow coming in, okay, or I've got $6 a cow coming in as total income. And then you can start chopping up the pie, all right, to see what's left. All right, it's really simple, but it's an interesting answer, isn't it, Shona? You know, we've spent a lot of time with our industry upskilling on doing broad-based financials, but most people on a very short-term basis aren't at first base.
No, knowing your daily position.
Daily position, or milk income per cow. So it's pretty simple. It's 20 litres a cow, it's 60 cents, it's $12 income a day, for example.
I know how much you're feeding.
Yeah. So look, I reckon if you can do that, that's a pretty cool thing. Okay.
Every time the fat drops a percent,
yep,
we lose a cent.
Yep. Well, it's yeah.
That's about what it works on.
It's pretty simple. So, and look, for that calculation, you know, if you're on $10 a kilo for milk protein, it's about a cent a litre for every 0.1 up and down you go. And if you're at $5 a kilo for milk fat, it's about half a cent per every point you're up and down. Okay, and it's simple little numbers and adjustments like that that become pretty handy when you're working out how you're travelling. So look, I think the next thing once you've worked your income out is your daily milk and feed costs that we should be working out. So Rod, you've already alluded to that, okay? Max, you might be feeding what, 7 kilos, 8 kilos in the dairy?
4.5 now.
Yep, 4.5 kilos. Okay, that's fine. And that's at 60 cents.
We used to feed that.
Yep. That's
we
okay.
cut it back.
Well, and that may or may not be the right decision, but that's okay.
Well,
it might be the only decision you could have made. And that's exactly right. So there's no right or wrong here, okay? And that's really, really important in these discussions. There's no right or wrong. It's a matter of, can we challenge things to maybe do it differently, and is that appropriate at times? So look, if we're feeding 4 kilos at $600 a tonne, for example, okay, it's 60 cents a kilo, it's $2.40.
Well, don't worry, I still know how to turn the dial back up when grain prices.
Yeah, or when herd recording's on. Sorry, Max. I say that with huge respect. Okay, once we've got that, and we'll step through this, we can determine this break-even cost on feeding in terms of litres per cow per day. Really, really important decision, okay, when we're tight on feed, okay, is to know, well, if I'm buying $5 worth of feed, how many litres does a cow need to do to pay for itself, okay? So if she's costing me $5 a day to feed, 50 cents a litre, she's got to do at least 10 litres a day to pay for herself. And there's a few caveats around that we'll talk about, and we'll go into that a little bit further. I think this is a really important number to think about here, and it's one that not many people look at. What's the cost of feeding the last cow in my herd?
Same as the first one.
Yeah, it is, but not always, Max, because the problem with the last cow in your herd, if you're buying a feed or you're feeding a lot of conserved feed, she's effectively being fed on 100% purchased feed, because her feed could be redistributed to other cows and that could come out of their purchased feed. All right, so it's a slightly different number to think about. So if a fully purchased ration for that cow costs $7 or $8, then we've got to look at a slightly different number for really determining that value of the last cow that's walking in the dairy with respect to her break-even point. Okay, and it's particularly important when you go into very high-cost rations across the total ration.
That's also now really important then when we look at changing cow numbers. So
Absolutely, Josh.
increase cow numbers.
Yes.
And if you're already utilising your feed well,
Yep.
and you've got your percentage right, and you bring more cows on,
Yep.
effectively, if you've already been doing it well, You're going to have to feed them 100%.
The last cow is 100% purchase ration, effectively, because she'll be either pulling grass from other cows that need to be replaced with supplement. Okay, and again, that can be a really profitable call if milk's 60 cents and feeds 30 cents. But if milk's 60 cents and feeds 60 cents, it's a different story. Okay, I think making objective decisions on cows, okay, based on numbers and feeding based on margin over feed cost and feed conversion efficiency are really important things to think about. How many people here even contemplate feed conversion efficiency?
What was the last bit?
How many people here contemplate feed conversion efficiency, measure feed conversion efficiency?
Probably no.
No. All right, you saw Kerry's figures, which are outstanding. I think it was 55 or 60% of all costs on farm were feed related, up in that sort of level last year.
Yeah, well, there was 60% imported feed.
And your pasture costs. So you all own land. Land's a feed cost, isn't it, basically? All right, you all own machinery. Machinery's a feed cost, isn't it?
Land's not a feed cost.
But it is, in reality. You own land to grow food. So the asset is there to grow food. Absolutely. So I couldn't agree more. But we're expanding this discussion on why the dairy industry fails because it doesn't measure feed conversion efficiency. Right? Nearly all your asset is tied up with things that grow or provide feed. You know, we think the dairy is a place where we milk cows. It's a place where we feed cows. Okay?
I'd sort of say, you know, the dairy farm on the product does measure it to a point for efficiency.
Doesn't.
And that's because
Yep.
it's utilised as such.
Yep.
Where, you know, when I do trials or when we cut and carry, we can harvest 20 tonne of grass.
Yep.
But we can only, typically, when we look at utilisation, you know, that's 6 to 10 tonne.
Yep.
So that's
So they're sort of measures, but I'm talking about, well, how many litres per kilogram of dry matter? Okay, or how many grams of milk solids? You know, how many kilos of dry matter does it take to make 100 grams of milk solids? Absolutely, and that's exactly right, Max. So you can do both, and there's a 4% corrected equation you can do to equilibrate it the other way with fat. But we don't even think about feed conversion efficiency, okay? And it's actually the core driver of your profitability, and it's not even reported, feed conversion efficiency, most of the time. So I think these are things that we need to think about because there's about 20 things you can do to manipulate it, all right? And focusing on what you can do to manipulate that is important in drought, okay? It's important in low milk price, but I tell you what, Sheena, if people, when they had high prices, were also focusing on feed conversion efficiency at that time, how good would that gap look? Yep. Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Well, would it be fair to say that bank repayments is part of your feed costs as well, or not feed costs, but as
You can think of it that way, Max. Absolutely.
Well, you've still got to pay it.
You've still got to pay it.
It's like as if you weren't doing that in your
Well, if you financed a mixer wagon,
yeah.
that's a really good example. You know, it's a feed cost. Nothing wrong with that, but it's a big part of your capital base. A lot of we own the land, we own all this stuff, but it's all about feed. So if you go to the other intensive industries like poultry and pigs, okay, they live and breathe this stuff. Feedlot guys, they live and breathe it, okay? And we need to start thinking about it in dairy because and we're starting to measure this quite regularly on our regular visits, and we see a huge range, okay, in corrected litres from anywhere from sort of about 0.9 of a litre per kilo of dry matter up to 1.6. All right, so you can imagine that impact shifting in that range from 0.9 of a litre per kilo of dry matter up to 1.6, and particularly if your whole system is geared around feeding cows, which it is. It's profound. And similarly, we talk about kilos of dry matter per 100, it's grams of milk solids per kilogram of dry matter. And we see that vary from about 0.8 up to about 1.1. There's some big variations there, but we'll have a look at that in a second. So look, I think that's a really important thing to think about because again, it gives you a bit of an idea, well, how well am I going with my feed base? Okay, how well am I going with my cows? Because things that influence will be your genetics, the quality of the feed you buy, the balance of your ration, your reproductive management, all right? Your feed wastage, all those things that we can actually work on in little areas that actually can make a big difference in that area.
Weather conditions.
Absolutely. So heat stress is a huge one, Max. Okay. So we heard about Scott managing the cows. Okay. That has a huge impact on feed conversion efficiency because cows burn energy staying cool. right? Quite profound. But the other thing they do when they're cool is that they eat more. Now, the ironic thing, all right, with feed conversion efficiency, generally the more the cows eat, the more efficient is their feed usage. Okay, because a higher proportion of what they eat goes to production rather than maintenance. Assessing your own herd's feed conversion efficiency is really cool. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what can you do to improve your situation.